whether it's children or adults, we all start out drawing a little bit. Maybe that'll change with AI. I don't know, but I think it's a natural thing to do. And I don't necessarily think going to university is the best way, or going to specialized schools is the best way to enhance ability. Some of my favorite artists are accomplished in another field and segued into what they do, and they bring a freshness to it that I love.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Tracey, please go ahead.
Thank you, Maurice. It's wonderful to participate. I love the interviews you've been doing, and they're also unique and fascinating. I don't know if I'm unique and fascinating, but my name is Tracey Berglund, and I was born in Brooklyn and grew up mostly in what wasn't the Brooklyn that people are excited about now. It was almost like the hinterland, a little tiny town where not very much happened, not at all like the sensational place it is now. And I've always been an artist, doing artwork in different realms, sometimes for fashion, sometimes for books, sometimes for corporations, sometimes for gyms, for TV shows, sometimes for lawyers. So I'm really grateful that I've managed to maintain the child passion that I always had for observing and using my ability to draw and learn new things. And that's still what I do.
And take us back to, because you were alluding to that I never lost that curiosity, from when you were a child. When you go back to your childhood, have you always been drawing? How did that go? Or did your parents, showed you this? How did it happen?
Good question. My mother did give me materials to draw with, and I was naturally building and making things. But I would segue that question to my parents were rather abusive, and I found refuge in drawing. Whether I was good in the beginning, I don't know, but it was definitely, and I remember the feeling well, and only wish that I still had my childhood drawings, but I don't, because as an adult, it's always really interesting to, like I told you earlier, see something you did and see something about it or yourself or the environment that you didn't notice when it was being made. So I found I enjoyed it. I was very studious. I had my materials. I remember working out how to draw a nose from this angle or that angle. I was very focused. And it allowed me to just really enjoy myself and also remove myself from perhaps situations that were a little erratic. And I kept doing it. And it was, one of those things teachers notice. Oh, you're good in music. You're not. I remember I was told I was terrible in home economics. I couldn't sew. I couldn't cook. I still can't cook and sew. But I was good at this. And perhaps, and I think educationally, it's really important for any student to find that thing where someone is praising them so that they have and build confidence and feel pride and can explore other things. So that's the thing I explored. And I held on to it.
And I can ask you a question, because you were saying, that you had abusive parents. So did people see that also in the drawings that you made? And did they?
Really great question. I can only say that I wish I could have seen my drawings from when I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which don't exist. Somebody literally had to. Like, I have 2 children, and I've saved I've saved a lot of their artwork, and it's amusing and it's fun, and we remember, because I don't think that time really exists. I don't mean to sound woo-woo, but I think you can burrow right back into a memory that might have happened 20 years ago or longer. So I don't think anyone noticed my drawings were abusive. I was a very good little girl in Brooklyn, and I went to school and got great grades. And it was a different time. It was the 70s. And yeah, I wanted to go to art school. And I eventually did, despite the fact that it wasn't meant to be a career path. I was meant to be a secretary or marry an accountant from Brooklyn. And I wasn't even told that there were schools where someone with a really good ability could go. And one of my sons went to New York City Public Music School, the famed school, LaGuardia.
Mhm.
My other son went to Stuyvesant, which is known for math and science. And as a parent, I was very much aware, like, oh, it would be great if they were able to follow their strengths and improve on something. But I didn't have that little luxury, but I did go to art school, mostly on my own by working and moving out and taking lots of jobs to fund it. So yeah, it was
Okay.
good.
Did you do you have any siblings?
I have a brother.
Yeah.
He pursued business,
Mhm.
which was kind of typical at the time. My family was lower middle class. My father worked in a factory, and my mother was a part-time secretary. They did have passions. You know, my father, I know, wanted to be a gym teacher. He was very
Mm.
athletic. And I remember children absorb everything. The feeling that he would have been happier had he really pursued what he liked. He used to do pull-ups over my bedroom door. There
Mm.
was a bar there, and very into sports, as many people are. And my mother was a homemaker who didn't go, neither of them went to university or college. So their goals for us was I would marry well, and and my brother would in some way pursue business. Yeah, I took a
Mm.
different track. He stayed on that track. And yeah, I
Yeah.
don't remember the question, but I hope I didn't go too off-road.
No, no, no. I mean that's for me that's always I always like to, a lot of my listeners would like to understand how do you get where you are at the moment, so how do you get into NGO sector, how do you get into arts, how do you get into business? And what
Mhm.
I like to discuss with my guests is, where did you grow up, and then how did you end up where you are, and your sibling maybe not, because
Mhm.
that's I find it interesting, at least, so
I
that's
do
why I
too.
asked the question.
Yeah.
So Tracy, so your parents were first generation,
My
or sec
grandparents came over from Eastern Europe,
okay.
Romania and Poland and Russia. My grandmother was 14 and came out over on a boat to be someone's maid. Yeah, so I think just being able to raise a family and put a roof over our heads and work hard and keep everybody safe, that was the goal. The idea of
Mhm.
being an artist or maybe a basketball player or a TV chef, no, 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 that was extreme.
Tell us a bit more about your route went from, um, you didn't want to become a secretary, you wanted to go into the arts, but then you had to work. So how did it go? And ultimately, where did you study the arts?
I'll make one comment about studying. I work with children at a nonprofit called
Mm-hmm.
Inkwell Kids, and it always occurs to me that, and even when I work in DC with companies like IBM, last
Mm-hmm.
week I was illustrating on law enforcement with people who had had careers in the FBI and CIA. Whether it's children or adults, we all start out drawing a little bit. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that'll change with AI. I don't know, but um, I think it's a natural thing to do, and I don't necessarily think going to university is the best way, or going to specialized schools is the best
Mm-hmm.
way to enhance ability. Some of my favorite artists are accomplished in another field and segued into what they do, and they bring a freshness to it that I love. Not everyone, but so yes, I did study professionally, but pivotal to me becoming me. One of my first goals was to get out of my house and to travel. It was
Mm-hmm.
just, I really wanted to. I hadn't been to Europe, but it was this little bee in my head, like, I want to go live in Europe. I want to travel in Europe. Don't know where it came from exactly. I read a lot, and I always loved literature and art and photography and film, but I had a job one summer traveling with teenagers across the United States as a chaperone. I don't know what I was meant to do, but I knew that what I was going to do was see more than Brooklyn. And I went that experience, both being with children, not children, young people, maybe 11, 12, 13, 14, who had such different backgrounds than I did, and seeing new experiences through their eyes and my eyes, and seeing nature and California and Utah. It was camping and some hotels. It just opened my eyes to other people aren't like my parents. There are places that aren't like Brooklyn. And it was just like a Jack in the Box that wasn't scary. And once that came out, I was on my way to being me. And I was also into music a lot, which which I think often defines, people find themselves who they are through the music that they choose to like. And I was into heavy metal, I guess. I don't know if they would have called it that. Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, and that was kind of extreme for a young, quiet woman girl from Brooklyn. So those factors propelled me forward into wanting to travel and wanting to pursue art and wanting to have as varied experiences as I possibly could.
Yes. And you traveled alone, or you went with
Well,
friends?
that trip was a commission. That was I was paid, which was thrilling to me. I was paid to supervise. I'd been a counselor maybe at upstate camp. I don't know if where you grew up in the Netherlands, they have that sort of experience for young people. They go away for the summer maybe, and they do things. But that was my first experience where I had a paid work for, I think it might have been 4 to 6 weeks, 6 weeks. And when I came back, I was another person, much to everyone's chagrin. And it just put me on a sense of, I'm going to save my money, travel to Europe, pursue this. I kind of felt very much like a flower that just bloomed.
Great. I would like to go to, if you go to your website and you read about, you see, you're an illustrator, a cartoonist, and a graphic recorder. And you and I, we met because you helped us out, my organization, and in our incubation lab during a meeting where you were one of the graphic recorders. What are you most passionate about, or is it all equal? Is it just this balancing? Sometimes you feel like being more an illustrator, more a graphic recorder, or what is your, and the reason that I'm asking is my sister is a filmmaker and a novelist, and a painter as well. And when she talks about these three things, or the 3 or 4 things that she does, she talks about, one is my husband, one is my lover, one is my muse. So so how is that for you?
That's a great way to start to think about how I'm going to answer. And I'd love to know more about your sister and even what kind of painting and film she does, because I'm not as organized in my brain or in my process to outline it like that. I know that I'm an extraordinarily visual person, and people that don't use art, but maybe design clothing, but that is art, or interior design, we're all using what we have as our observation skills and our sense of harmony and beauty. So I think there are so many ways to use it, whereas obviously writing is selecting words, which is just a code anyway. I'm fascinated that people can write stories and use words to create such strong realities, emotions, everything. But when it comes to the visual part, for me, it's very practical. I've always needed to earn my living since I was 16, moved out at 18. And I can't say that I have the ability to be frivolous about what I'm going to do any given day. When there's work, I work. When I need more work, I find more work. Some of it's more enjoyable than others. I keep sketchbooks, which I guess I didn't realize I was doing until I had like 100 of them, where, there's one now. I write my notes in here for myself, and I illustrate wherever I am. And I would say that's just a kind of, letting things out of my head way. So unlike your sister, I don't have a sense of like, this is my this, that's my that, and now I'm going to do this. When there's work, I work. When some of the work is really interesting, or I meet really interesting people, or a subject titillates me, oh, that's fabulous. But I also like to create humor pieces, some of which are in the New Yorker, some of which are in McSweeney's and narrative my family was very, they may have been abusive, but they were funny. And everyone I grew up with, humor was a big part of the culture and still a very big part of my life. So when I'm not scribing, I'm usually thinking about things and turning things over and looking at things and coming up with my own visual stories, which I sell and don't sell. Some get sold and some don't. So that's one of mine. And maybe that would be the lover part of it, because that's something I do without knowing if it's going to bring profit, but you can't stop me. And I have to be inspired. Something comes and gets caught, I take notes, I go back to it. And yeah, what else do I do? I write, I draw, I'm part of a film right now. Some filmmakers doing something with art. So sometimes I land in places I don't expect to land. Or when I lived in South Africa, someone said, "Oh, we're making murals in a township. Would you like to work with us?" So sometimes things land in my lap, and if it sounds like fun, I say sure. So yeah, I think I'm a little bit more, when I've had full-time jobs, I shouldn't forget that. Sometimes I've been employed gainfully with a steady salary and spent that 401k already, but then I wasn't a free agent. I would show up at meetings, do what I was meant to do, deliver the PowerPoints or the graphics, and a certain amount of years of my life were dedicated to full-time jobs in different careers. But specifically now, I get to have what was it? A lover, a wife, a husband? What was it? What was the?
Yeah, husband. I don't know exactly what you said, but
Okay.
a lover,
We're in charge
husband, a muse. Yeah. Okay, so maybe I push you a bit in terms of, suppose somebody said to you, oh, those drawings that you make when you're, sitting in the park, when you're waiting, for your next plane, all those things that you make, I will guarantee that you will earn enough money to make a living, and that it will be, exhibited. Would you then drop the graphic recording?
No, it's a really good question, because there's something like a performance aspect of it that I like, but I also I get the privilege of being a fly on the wall. When people are at the next table in a restaurant, I'm on my own waiting for somebody, I will eavesdrop. I'm a nosy person. So, and I like other languages because it allows me to even eavesdrop into other languages. I just want to know as much as I want to know. I mean, it's not like I would invade your privacy, Maurice, but I'm curious. And when you watch something, when you sit and look at something for a long time, or listen to something for a while, or watch someone's behavior, it's kind of like theater without it being staged and paid for. So when it comes to the graphic recording, if I'm at a peacekeeping meeting, I was at one a few years ago in Kenya, and last week on law enforcement, and sometimes on new flavors of ice cream for Unilever, it's just broadens my sense of the world. It's kind of like that little girl that was in Brooklyn. I don't want to sound like Kamala Harris, like, there's some cliche terms about, I was that little girl, but I've always been curious, and I love being privy to things that I can learn from, but then I'm not a selfish person. I want to give back. So it's more like everyone can remember what they heard, hopefully, or be tickled by a perspective on it, or return to something more visual than a PowerPoint by looking at the drawings. I once did a job in northern South Africa, KwaZulu-Natal, on how women in townships were able to use mobile devices to communicate medical needs and emergencies to people that didn't have access, and it kept them safe, and it tied the community together. And people in the room with me or I was in the room with them, were speaking multiple African languages, but they absolutely were chuffed to see drawings up there that didn't require words or translation or taglines or logos. They were walking out with that drawing that was theirs. They weren't asking permission. They were leaving the room with that. It meant something to them. So I feel sometimes that in the right circumstances, the drawings are lifting people up and helping them relate to each other in something important.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let us go to, is there is there a project, a drawing, anything that you're doing at the moment that you would like to share with the listeners? And if not, maybe tell about, how does those drawings for the New Yorker come about?
Okay, I'll
What is
take
the
both
process?
questions.
Okay.
I'm going to remove something from my wall right now because I had an exhibit, not the first time, just I guess you'd call it fine art, city portraits, and I'll show you one of them so I can answer the first part of the question. I made these scenes of New York City and people with three-dimensional things from, just putting things together that were meaningful to me. And I'll show you another one because there was something nice about having it permanent and in glass, and they're kind of lively and happy. I've sold many of these, but so these are an example of something that I like enough to even keep around. And I think they're, for the most part, joyful and three-dimensional.
Can you describe them for the listeners?
Describe, right? No one's going to see these. Because I sketch in a book often where I am, whether I'm traveling for work, in an interesting place, which really motivates me. My favorite place to travel has been Brazil. I've gone there a lot. And I just love the colors and the vivacity, is that a word? Vivaciousness of the people. And so I have a lot of sketchbooks of wherever I've gone, whether it's a family holiday or, on the subway, trying to avoid people seeing that I'm drawing them because they're on their phone anyway. But when I get home, these things that you want me to describe are sort of a mixture of my daily life sketches and like a ticket or a sequin heart or a three-dimensional card, or just bits and pieces and artifacts of things that I glue together. It sounds really bad when I describe it, but
That's beautiful. It's like,
thank you. But in words, like again, words are symbols, which is why I like not to use words. I use too many words, my children tell me. So maybe it's good that I draw. There was a second part to your question about how I come up with New Yorker cartoons. I like to observe life, and a lot of things amuse me or seem ridiculous or silly, or why do people do this or do that? And my son was telling me earlier today, he's visiting, that he was in Germany and he noticed that he got in the elevator somewhere, I think it was a medical office, and he pressed the button he was going to, and then a woman in the elevator pressed the button she was going to, but then she must have thought about it because she pressed another button. So instead of 5, she pressed 5 and 6. And then another woman walked in the elevator and she pressed 10, but then must have made it. So while he was telling me this, we were both thinking, this is odd behavior. And then he said, he thought he would say to them, oh, why don't we just press all the buttons as long as we're at it? Because he found, watching this, he made this little story in his head, but he said it was Germany. We love Germany. But he said they wouldn't have got it. They wouldn't have understood his joke, because humor in some ways is personal to the person. Musicians have their own humor. My boyfriend is a musician, and what cracks up a musician, they know it's not going to be a joke for the rest of the world because they have, and similarly with culture. But I love to come up with my own things to amuse myself, and I'll jot down an idea and work on the idea. I have lots of friends who are cartoonists, and I will put together some things, and some of them get sold, some of them don't, but I definitely, the goal is to amuse myself along the way. So if I'm rejected, it's not a horrible experience.
okay. And is it really every week? Or
well, the New Yorker, as an example, comes out every week. McSweeney's comes out, I'm not sure if that's every month. Narrative magazine, I have a piece in now. I think that's every few weeks. But all of the people who do these cartoonists, we're not saving our money to buy a castle in Spain or France. We do it because we love it, and it's a community, and it's fun, and it's, New Yorker has fantastic writing, so it's kind of a highbrow place to be. But there's not a sense of how often, it's when people buy the work. And some people are much more capable and funnier and en vogue at any given moment So there's not really a way to know how often your work will be.
Okay.
And then when
Okay.
it's bought, you don't know when it's going to come out. It could come out a year later.
Okay. No, I'm asking because I know that I know a cartoonist in the Netherlands. I think she has I think it's daily, but a newspaper, and then she put all those daily cartoons together, and it's sold as a book, and it's doing very well.
That's
Actually.
wonderful.
So yeah, I was thinking about. Have you ever put all your drawings that were published in New York and in a book?
No, I don't know that there are that many that would fill a book, but I do have a book I illustrated. That came out in October that's about New York City. Two other artists are featured here, but there's a lot of New York City style artwork in here that.
Okay, you should send me the title and then I can put it also. We can put it in the podcast link as well, so people can click and then buy the book. So
thank you.
Hey Tracey, I told you that this podcast is a spin-off of a 100-mile walk I've been doing since 2012. It's my it was kind of my attempt to talk about volunteers within my organizations who were organizing hunger walks to raise money for hunger within the US as well as overseas. So I wanted to, tell the world, because it was amazing for me coming from Europe. Yes, we have volunteerism, but it's different than in the US. So anyway, so I tried to raise money and awareness around hunger, poverty, and injustice during COVID. I still did it, but I was not able to walk with others. So I thought, okay, what can I do? Well, everybody was on Zoom, so I started this podcast, and it's gone out of hand a bit, right? So more than 200 episodes,
Wow.
talking about, a life, what drives people. And a question that I always ask my guests is then, what would make you walk 100 miles in a week? Is there a course that you would walk for, or is there another reason that you would walk 100 miles in a week?
I love to walk. I don't know if beneath this question is really a deeper question of what would you exhaust yourself over and sacrifice comfort for a long period of time. Because again, for me, I can walk miles, and I would love to walk miles for a good cause other than getting a great slice of pizza or sketching. So I guess also the question is, where are my sympathies strongest that I would make this particular effort? And I imagine it's the raising of money that the walks allow to occur that is the driver for the walking. Is that right? Because people are sponsoring your walk. I guess I have a lot of things that I feel strongly about that I would make efforts towards. Your effort is towards hunger. And when I went to look on the UN's SDG site and was remembering, because I illustrated on that topic a bit, and I've heard your other speakers talk about wishing the world had more empathy. So the things that would move me to walk, I think would involve maybe closer to, because I live in New York City, education for young people, that they have opportunities to engage with things that will really be motivators in their life. I don't suggest that anybody should be an artist or a musician, but good education, good food at schools, anywhere, everywhere. It doesn't seem like that is an easy thing to do in this United States. I can't really say of ours, you live here, but the United States doesn't seem to have prioritized that. And the fact that there's so many unhealthy children or underfed children, okay, that's hunger. I agree, that's probably a critical and an issue that I would want to support as well. And I'm thinking the younger to start, the better.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and Actually, when I talked 2 or 3 episodes ago, Glenn Denning from Columbia University reminded me again that, you know, the first 1,000 days of a child are extremely important. So that means during pregnancy of a mother, you know, and then before the child gets 3 years old, it's if the child doesn't get the right food, you know, that will have huge implications for the rest of the child's life. So food, nutritious food is always important, but the first 1,000 days are extra critical. So that's also something that the Sustainable Development Goals are trying to address in, you know, under SDG number 2, end hunger. SDG number 1 is end poverty. Now, thanks for that, Tracey. You were referring to the SDGs. As you know, maybe know that I always try to talk about the SDGs during these conversations as well, even if my guests are not aware of them. Then I ask them, can you please, you know, do a little bit of research on it? Yeah, if I ask you to, you know, what you would like the listener to know about the Sustainable Development Goals, what is it? Is it, yeah.
Personally, I guess I wish I read the newspapers, a lot of them, and of course, it depends what one chooses as one's source of information, truth information. I guess I haven't been noticing or reading that much about it lately, possibly my own fault, or maybe the online subscriptions I have are aware of what I generally read and are sending me, you know, customized stories. You know, I'd like to be more aware of where they are, if there are successes. I did read that 2030 was kind of one of the, you know,
before the goals need to be reached before 2030.
Right, but it might take longer. So maybe rather than, and I don't mean to be critical, seeing a little graphic, because I'm so visual and I do like understanding through pictures and words, understanding some of the successes and maybe even which countries are doing better, and more nuanced and textured information to make me aware of where things are on a regular basis, so that it stays front of mind. Yeah,
no, and you're not wrong. It's one of the reasons that I try to talk about it, and especially in the US. I think the US is not doing a great job, and it's the only country that did not never reported on their progress on the SDGs. There are many countries where people know much more. You go into the, you know, the streets or whatever, they will know about what is SDG 1, what is SDG 2, and it's not perfect. But what I like about it is that, you know, many people around the world have discussed this and came up with these goals and said, this is enough. You know, our world is not sustainable. It's going, you know, the trends are going downward. So we have to do something about it. It's not perfect, but I think it makes a lot of sense in trying to reach those goals. And unfortunately, we are only at 15% on average. And as you said, we have 6 years to go. So, you know, it's not looking good. So, you know, I know climate is close to your heart, right? You are active around that. Can you tell a little bit, you know, why and what you're trying to do and how you are involved? Climate action is, of course, also one of the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the 17. So.
I wish I could take more credit for making the choice myself to illustrate on climate. I've noticed in my live drawing with various nonprofits and companies that they often have a particular subject matter that's on vogue, relevant, at the forefront, or being looked at on a given year. And a few years ago, I was called upon to participate for a while in a lot of women's progress and gender conference drawings, which is super interesting and relevant. And there was a period where climate and sustainability became a subject that I was exposed to and able to hopefully elucidate with my drawings and notes for audiences. And I won't say that I'm not aware of it, but as I travel and read about it, just reading about Sicily this morning. I went to Sicily a few months ago, because one of my sons was working there, and what I saw was a charming, interesting country. But when I looked at the news this morning, there was a goat farmer. Sorry if I'm getting too specific here, and the news, was that it was devastated. There was no water. That he was possibly going to have to, you know, I don't know the best word for it, that his goats might be no more because he wasn't able to give them sufficient. So I realized that as a tourist or a traveler or even an enthusiastic reader, one isn't always made aware of what really is behind the scenes. And I found that shocking, devastating, upsetting, and one in any country you live in, if people are aware, they know how. Yeah, I'm not being very articulate here. Every country and every city and every place and every industry knows how they're being personally affected: crops, weather, storms, livelihoods, whatever it might be. And so, I think we have to educate ourselves on it, but I'm not even sure what the behavior is that I should do differently personally. Maybe you can tell me, being aware of climate activism these years, what behavior would I do differently that might improve things? Not fly, perhaps, or buy locally made products, or
Yeah.
I don't
No, and a good question. And it for many people, of course, it's overwhelming, right? There's so much going on, and the predictions are not good at all. We have already crossed 6 of our planetary boundaries, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. So yeah, we have created a system that is not sustainable. We are not in the right balance, the humanity with the planet. We've always only thought about ourselves. Our whole economic system is based also on that, on our growth, on our well-being, and not of the whole planet. So that definitely needs to change. So what can you do yourself is, well, I mean, you can become an advocate, of course, in terms of ensuring that this country listen to people who might be the next president, what they say about sustainability and all these things, but also locally, to ensure that you have the right people in office in your local where you live. What can you do yourself? Is the answer that I can give there is that for most people, the biggest polluter is flying, right? So if you would do one international flight less per year. That's equivalent of driving a whole year in your hybrid car. So yeah, I mean, if instead of, well, there are extreme people saying don't fly at all, but if that's not feasible maybe for everybody, then instead of the 6 flights you did, you go to 5, or if you did 3, you go to 2. Take some more often the train. So talk with your neighbors about it. So there are things that you can do. I see the glass still half full, but there are also people out there that has shown me data that sometimes I do realize the glass is half empty. But I refuse to give up. I think we need to continue to work on this. So, and one of the things is talking with people about a number of issues through this podcast. And I hope that by connecting people, people are exposed to different opinions and perspectives, etc. So talking about that, Tracey, is I try to connect my guests with other guests, and so not only by listening to motivate my guests to listen to the other episodes, but also I have a question of a previous guest for you.
Oh, really?
And the question is,
let's see, my question for the next guest would be, when was the last time you really spent time with the earth and nature and connected with it? And tell me about that.
It depends how deep that connection goes. That's a really good question. I was just walking along the Hudson River near my house. I live on the west side of Manhattan. And, you know, there were trees with leaves blowing in the wind. It's a windy day. The water was kind of very active and wavy. There were waves. And I was looking at people, some of whom were just relaxing, some were exercising. I was making a little movie for someone. Maybe that is in terms of locally nature. I was just an hour or 2 or 3 ago. But in terms of maybe a deeper way, let me think. Oh, wow. Dragonfly just hit my window. Yeah, you know, Carl Jung had an experience where he was talking to somebody and suddenly a gold beetle hit the window, and it's supposed to be a profound thing. I don't know what dragonfly meant. Yeah, like I love to travel in, like I said, Brazil. I haven't been there for a number of months, but when I go there, I try to go to some more remote places. But in terms of nature in New York City, maybe I'm not the best person to ask. I did take a ferry around the island recently, and if water is nature, then that was my experience with nature. Yeah, I don't think I'm the best answerer of that particular question.
Does it occur in your drawings? The earth, nature?
I don't know. I think the things I draw are intuitive and around, and sometimes they're made up. So I don't really know the answer to that question either. I seem to have drawn a lot of wine glasses lately, but that's probably because I was waiting for an assignment and I happen to be in a bar or restaurant where people don't notice me. So do I draw a lot of earth? No, I'm really a city person, and I guess I like the theater of cities. So when I did live in South Africa for 2 years, I do have sketchbooks filled with, I'd gone to some nature reserves and I was astounded and so moved by seeing rhinoceroses. How do you say the plural of rhinoceros? Is it rhinoceri? Elephant. I went to an elephant park that was saving elephants. So I've had those experiences, luckily. Yes, I had to fly to get there, not so good. But in my daily life, I probably am not the nature woman that I would like to be in my next life.
You do need Mother Earth to make your wine. So
that's true. I like that thinking. Yeah, thank you.
You know, music is very important to me, and I would like to hear what type of music your husband is making. But so I have always questions about music as well, or a question about music. You know, if I ask you to come up with a piece of music or a song that best embodies, for a big part, what you are about, what Tracey is about, which song or piece of music would that be, and why?
I'm going to have to refrain from answering that because each piece of music is so distinctive, and I have a lot of layers, as we all do. Right now, one of my kids is getting married in California in a few days. When you're off to the Netherlands, I'm off to California. And it's been this whole debate lately on what song do I dance with my son to? And, you know, that's a very loving experience, but the song is related to the experience and my relationship with him. But I'm very passionate about the music I like, and I'm very, whatever the opposite of passionate is, I'm really reluctant to listen to music that I don't feel close to. So the short answer is I don't have one song. I have a lot of favorite songs. The song I want to dance to with my son is a song by Sly. I like funk. I love Sly and the Family Stone, and it's got such a heartbeat to it, and great energy.
Is there a specific title from Sly and the Family Stone?
Oh, I like a good bass line. So the song that I like, it's not about the title or the lyrics. The song is If I Want You to Stay, which is the song I like. But I also suggested the song All of My Love, which Robert Plant sang with Led Zeppelin, because that felt approachable, but appropriate rather, but not danceable. I don't know. The music is like a million planets out there. I can't pick one. I love music, depending on my mood. What about you? I know you're a Miles fan, because I know when I listened to you interview somebody, you had a couple of really good comments, but there's so many episodes of Miles, so you can't even commit to that, even if you pick an artist. So that's the hardest question you've asked me so far, Maurice.
And the majority of the people do find that the most difficult question. So
Yeah.
I still would like to hear the title of Robert Plant that you mentioned, the title of that song.
The song that I would like to dance to at my son's wedding.
Yeah.
You might not allow me to. I think it's called If You Want Me to Stay. If you ever do a search for the best bass lines in songs, it's definitely one of the ones that'll come up. I might have to send it to you by a text or email.
Okay.
It's just such a great, happy song. I don't want a song that's going to make me cry. Even when I'm happy, I don't mind being moved, but I like in my art and in my music, the rhythm of something positive. I don't mind melancholy. One of my sons is a musician, and I love his music. He makes animations, he tours, blah, blah, blah. My boyfriend, not husband, is a drummer and a percussionist, and he plays with theater and jazz and this and that. But I personally like songs that make you want to stand up and dance. I'm not a melancholy person most of the time.
Okay. And it's funny what you said. And my apologies for assuming,
Oh, no. I had one of those before.
And I like that he's a drummer, because I want to be a drummer as well. Wow. No, but two things around this question. One is that I think you answered a lot around the question and why difficult to come up with one. If I look at your work, everything you do, I understand that it's difficult to pick one. You didn't want to pick between illustrator, cartoonist, and graphic recorder as well. The lyrics are not that important, but the bass is. I'm not surprised around that as well. So that's one part. The other is that I came up with a Spotify playlist of all the songs that are picked by my guests. And so if you go to Spotify and you type in #WalkTalkListen, all those songs that were picked by my guest, and it's really cool. That goes from classical music to hard rock, melodic rock, jazz.
Great.
And I will add those two songs, one song of Sly and the Family Stone and one song of Robert Plant, in honor of you. So
thank you.
Next question that I have for you is, your question for the next guest.
I'm not sure I'm going to articulate this well, but my question might be, and of course I have no idea who your next guest is, and I'm sure they'll be interesting because you choose people that I believe have passions and are well-meaning, but somewhere in the overlap between what people do and when they're not seeing the success they want to see with their efforts, perhaps it's because they work for an NGO or the government in power is not supporting their mission, or maybe what they do musically or artistically, creatively is not, in fashion at a given moment. I'd be curious to know how they compensate for themselves to proceed to maintain their endeavor and their focus and their pushing forward of what's meaningful to them when the current is not going the way they need it or prefer it to go.
Okay. Cool. I don't know if this is still happening, but Steve Hartman of CBS, he is examining or has examined one simple act of kindness and its potential to create a ripple effect. There was some nice videos he made around it. I have two questions around the simple act of kindness. One is, what are your thoughts about the potential of the simple act of kindness in terms of creating a ripple effect? And then the second part of the question is, if I ask you to come up right now with one simple act of kindness that you would do this week, what would you do?
That's easy. Since I'm drawing all the time, I don't know if it's an act of kindness. Maybe I'm flattering myself. Maybe it's the opposite. But sometimes when I'm drawing, on the subway or in a bus, and this happens also years ago when I was on a bus in the middle of Tanzania or something. And if people notice what I'm doing, or maybe are not familiar with it, or maybe I feel like I've made them feel uncomfortable, I will I will rip out, which I don't like to do in my sketchbooks, rip out the page and give it to them as a gift. Usually I try to make people look better than they look. I mean, I never, yeah. I try to make sure that, I don't know, even when I draw, I want things to look better, less grimy. So that might be my act of kindness, like a mother has a child on the subway, if I found it fun to draw quickly, which is like an exercise, because I'm not going to make a great drawing when you're doing it in 20 seconds and you don't know if the person is going to move or get off. But that's an act of kindness, which I find people like, or I'll find out the name of their child and sign my name. And it's just a little unexpected niceness. Or like I say, maybe people don't like it, but and just smiling at people, which doesn't, some of my European friends come over and they're, like, oh, people are so friendly in New York. And I'm thinking most of the time, like, really? That's nice that you're experiencing that, because it can go either way in this kind of city. Sometimes my neighbors, I walk by them, that's fine. Privacy is important. So the other act of kindness would be just a sincere smile or admiring somebody's dog. It doesn't take any effort, right? Makes people feel good.
Yeah. So you do think it has the potential for a ripple effect?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would like to go back to my, the when I walk with, this is especially happening when I walk with other people. You start thinking about things like, but why am I on this earth? What is the purpose? And so when you are at mile 15, you still have another 5 to go per day. So yeah, then we talk about religion, spirituality. And I'm especially fascinated about the conversation around youth and spirituality and religion, because some folks I've talked with, they said, or they're saying, the younger generation, because they go, especially in the West, they go less to church. So they are less religious, they are less spiritual. And there are people saying, no, that's not true. The fact that they might not go to church doesn't mean that they are not religious, or that might not be that's not an evidence that they are not spiritual. So the question that I have for you is, what do you see in your own community around this topic of youth and religion and spirituality? Just some observations. It's not about, another PhD on this, but I'm just curious. Yeah.
It's a great question, Maurice. The only youth I hang around with these days that I can get intimate enough to be able to verbalize or question are my own sons who are in their 20s to 30s, and other friends of mine and their children. But as you probably know, communities stay with people that are similar to them. So my community tends to be creative artists, teachers, creative business people, filmmakers, and people in big cities. I don't have a lot of friends that are religious, and I know that the word spiritual means different things to different people. My family was Jewish, but they didn't teach us anything about the religion. It was more of a divider than something we knew about. I was married to a person who was Protestant. I think my morality is one of love and do unto others, but I wouldn't say I attend or work within a community, although I have worked in churches and orphanages sponsored by churches. So I've taken my art and my ability to work and interest in working with children non-denominationally to wherever would welcome me. But I don't know that I have a community that I can talk about that has a particular religion that they love. But knowing that you were going to ask me this question, can I make a comment?
Yeah, so sure.
Yeah. So like a long time ago, probably when I, maybe 18 years ago, I read the book The Life of Pi, which I think the writer, yeah, I think his name is Yantel, Yantel. I'm not sure. He won a lot of awards, but the story and it always stuck with me. It became a play, won awards, blah, blah. But it was about a young Hindu boy who, aside from being raised Hindu, was out wandering in his world. And it's a very philosophic book. And he takes guidance from a Muslim man and from someone maybe who was a Christian. But the point was, he encountered people of different faiths and wanted to learn about them. And when his father found out, because I think one of these mentors said, "Oh, your son's such an interesting young man. I love talking to him about Christianity, or I love talking to him about Buddhism or whatever." The father was horrified. What? My son is a Hindu. But the boy was curious, and he took all these things in, and he was trying to understand the passion and love and morality of different people, different opinions. I'm probably saying this really badly, which is why I draw instead of write. But I have that feeling. I'd like to. I've taken comparative religion classes, and I've sat at the table of Orthodox rabbis who I try to ask, why on earth would you be voting for Trump? So I have conversations, but I wouldn't say I have a particular community. I have the curiosity that young boy has. Tell me why you believe what you believe, and how does that sit with what other people believe? How do we live in harmony together, even within the same belief system? There's so many different tribes.
No, and I really appreciate you explaining this, but also I think it's great that you do that. I mean, I hope that also this podcast will show people different perspectives, when again, you don't have to agree with all the different guests that come to the podcast, but then you understand at least their perspectives and how people think. And I think that's more than ever necessary in this world where there is so much polarization. You need to understand, if you want to change a system, you also need to understand the basis of a system. And the religion has played an enormous role in the development of that system that we have created, and is still, still 70 to 80% of the world population considers him or herself to a religion. So even though maybe church attendance have gone down, although you sent me that article that was written in the Washington Post. Also there you have difficulties in collecting data, real data around that. Yeah, right. So no, thanks for sharing that. Tracey, these conversations always go fast. Any last message, invitation, question for the listeners?
Maybe I'm going to try to be a little bit more coherent than I've been in phrasing it. But in times where there's so much at stake, and there's the boat can be going aground, the politics can be going this way. There's so much going on after COVID. There's still so much political strife and war. What gives other people confidence and hope to vote and to wake up feeling that they can make a difference? What gets them into a mindset that they can make a difference?
Also not an easy question. I would like to thank you for our conversation today and for everything you do and who you are. Any question that I didn't ask that I should have asked?
That you should have asked me? I don't know. I would make a comment that, whether it's providing for a family or educating children or just keeping peace in one's own family, community life, I don't think a lot of people have a choice in what they do for their work. So I hope I don't sound like, oh, everyone should have a passion and do what they want to do. That's not always an option. And I've certainly had a million different jobs, and I just feel lucky that I have been able to, for whatever the reason, to continue to do something I love. And I really respect people that go to a job that maybe doesn't hold a passion, but they're doing something really useful for their families, for communities. And
Thank you so much, and all the best. And we'll make sure that people can check out your website and see some of your work, especially because I hope you have a picture of what you just showed me also on your website. So
yeah, I may or may not, but I maybe need to upload a few.
Yeah, I would do that if I were you. Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, and yeah, we will keep in touch.
Thank you, Maurice. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.